Let me share a scenario and see if this feels familiar. You sit down at your computer in the morning with a plan. You're going to work on something important today. Maybe it's strategy, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's finally tackling that project that would actually move the business forward. But then the day starts, and suddenly you're replying to emails, scheduling meetings, following up with clients, fixing something in your CRM, tracking down a document, answering a quick question from someone that somehow eats up half an hour, approving something, sending something, updating something. And before you know it, it's 5 or 6 p.m. You were busy all day, but somehow you didn't actually move the business forward. And if that experience sounds familiar, you are not alone. And that realization is what completely changed how I run my businesses. Now, before we dive into the story, quick note for our regular listeners. Normally on this podcast, Scale Smart, Grow Fast, you hear my husband, Harley Green, hosting the show. But for the next few episodes, we're doing something a little different. I'm stepping in to guest host a short series where we talk about something that's really central to what we do at Workergenix: how entrepreneurs free up time, delegate effectively, and stop spending their day on tasks that don't actually require the founder or leader of the business. And if we haven't met before, I'm Adrienne Green, co-founder of Workergenix. I'm also still a real estate investor and a licensed agent today. And that's actually where this whole story and wild adventure started. The reason Harley and I started Workergenix is because of something I discovered in my own business that was so transformational, we wanted other entrepreneurs to be able to access it too. And that's where it all began. Now, when you first start a business, there's a phase that almost everyone goes through, the solopreneur phase, when you're basically every department in the company. You're the CEO, the marketing department, the operations team, the bookkeeper, the customer support, IT, and sometimes you're also the janitor, right? You're wearing all of the hats. In real estate, we call this being a solo agent, but honestly, the same thing happens in almost every business. Consultants experience it, coaches experience it, small business owners experience it, startup founders experience it. And when I became a real estate agent in 2018, that's exactly where I was. And to be fair, the business was working. I was doing about $5 million in annual sales, which was roughly 12 transactions a year, and I was making about $100,000 in income. Things were solid, but there was a hidden problem. Everything depended on me. Every email, every contract, every client communication, every marketing task, every operational detail. If something needed to get done, I was the one doing it. And when you're in that stage, it can actually feel pretty normal because you tell yourself, well, this is what running a business feels like. Now, somewhere during this time, I will say my husband Harley had read The 4-Hour Workweek, which, if you're married to an entrepreneur, is always a slightly dangerous moment because suddenly your spouse comes to you with business ideas they just read in a book. And Harley kept telling me you should hire a virtual assistant. And I had the very mature and thoughtful response of, absolutely not. I was like, how would that even work? Someone remote helping run my business? And I was so busy running the day-to-day that I couldn't even fathom taking the time to figure out how to make it happen. I was also convinced that it would take longer to explain the task and hand it off than to just do it myself, which is something a lot of entrepreneurs say. And it feels so true in the moment, but it's also one of the most dangerous traps we fall into. Then something happened that changed my perspective and honestly my entire life trajectory. I joined a real estate team at Keller Williams, and that team used virtual assistants inside the business. And this was the first time I saw the model actually working, and it was eye-opening because the assistants were handling a lot of the back-end work that normally eats up an entrepreneur's time. Things like marketing logistics, administrative tasks, operational coordination, which meant the agents on the team could spend more of their time doing things that actually grow a business. They could meet clients, build relationships, and generate deals. And this is the first time I really saw what leverage looks like in a business. Then we relocated from Northern Virginia to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which meant I had to rebuild my real estate business from scratch. I had to leave that team I had just joined. I was back to the solopreneur world, and I was now in a place where I knew no one. Now, in real estate, we talk about something called your sphere of influence. That basically means your network, the people you know who trust you and who eventually do business with you or refer business to you. And this concept exists in many industries I know. If you're a consultant, your first clients usually come from your network. If you run a service business, referrals often come from people who already know you. And if you're an entrepreneur launching something new, your early customers are often people who already trust you. But when I moved to Chattanooga, I had none of that. no network, no referral base, no past clients in the area. And to make things even more interesting, I had 3 children under the age of 5 at the time. Those seasons of life where there was a lot happening, both personally and professionally. At this point, I worked with a dear friend who's also a business coach to figure out what my strategy should be. And we made 2 key decisions. First, I decided to focus on working with real estate investors, which was a niche that I understood well and could have a competitive advantage in. Second, I finally listened to Hartley and I hired a virtual assistant, which I would love to say was because I realized how brilliant my husband is. But honestly, it was more because I realized something else. If I was going to rebuild this business from scratch, there was no way I could do every task myself. Now, the assistant I ended up hiring handled about 80% of my computer and phone-based tasks. They did things like email management, contract preparation, bookkeeping, CRM updates, client coordination, marketing logistics, video editing, and event planning. All the operational work that has to happen in a business, but doesn't necessarily require the founder or CEO to personally do it. And the results were dramatic. I hired that assistant in January of 2021. By August of that year, in a brand new market where I knew almost nobody, I had completed 54 transactions at about 10 million in volume. Compare that to my prior business in the market where I had a sphere but no assistant, and I was doing 12 transactions for 5 million in volume. Right? Eventually, this business grew into a real estate team that did about 27 million in volume annually before I sold that team. And one of the biggest reasons that this was possible was leverage. By having that virtual assistant do all of those operational tasks, I was freed up to do my top 20%, which is what actually brought in new business. So, for example, I could record that video that was going out on YouTube and was all my marketing, and all I had to do was record the video. My assistant would take it, edit it, do the thumbnail, write the caption, post it on social media, cut it up into reels to put on all the other things, and all of that happened and brought me in new business when I only had to take a few minutes to record that initial video. That's the kind of leverage or multiplier that allowed this whole business to work. That same kind of leverage happened with my other top 20% activities. So let's say I went and did some lead generation and brought in new potential clients. I would do the initial discovery call with those clients, see what they were looking for, what they needed. And then I would have a system where I could hand off to my executive assistant all the follow-up work that had to happen so that I could move on to that next discovery call, which was the piece only I could do. So that my executive assistant could be doing the email introductions to lenders or to property managers or to contractors. If this was a buyer, they could get that search set up in the MLS for that client. They could do all that follow-up that takes up so much of our time so that way we can go do more of these amazing meetings and have more business. And that, my friends, is what eventually led to us starting Workergenix. So we could help other entrepreneurs and business owners get that same kind of leverage and help with a virtual executive assistant and really have their businesses succeed and grow while giving them a bigger business and a bigger life.
If you're running a growing company and still handling too many operational details yourself, there's a better way forward. The Delegate or Die checklist shows you the exact tasks that drain leadership bandwidth and the simple changes that recover 15 to 30 plus hours a week. Download it free at workergenix.com/scalesmart. Now let's get back to the episode.
If you're feeling like your business keeps you busy, but is not necessarily moving forward, I created a guide called the Executive Efficiency Blueprint. It walks you through a simple framework to identify what you could delegate and how business leaders can reclaim 30 or more hours per week with a virtual executive assistant. You can download it below in the show notes. And in the next episode of this series, join me again next week, I'm going to talk about something that might surprise you. Because even though we run a company that provides virtual assistants, sometimes I actually tell people you shouldn't hire one. And knowing when not to hire help can save you a lot of time and money. So be sure that you've subscribed and join me again next week for another episode of Scale Smart, Grow Fast.